Welcome to Hungry Dads, your guided tour through the delicate and often overwhelming balancing act between food indulgences and social acceptance. And now, as always, here are your hosts, Rod Budget and Hugh Gallen.
Hello and welcome to episode 12 of Hungry Dads. I'm Rod Budget.
I'm Hugh Gallen.
And tonight we're going to start off with Hugh. He's had a little time to think more about the Lay's Do Us a Flavor results, and I think he has some insight. So take it away, Hugh.
This harkens back all the way to our very first episode, which was the chip episode number 1. And then about a month ago in episode 9, the Lay's Do Us a Flavor contest, which was a voting contest that Lay's Potato Chips did for some new flavors. The results came out right around episode 9, and we gave our reactions to that. If you need to listen back to those shows, you should. But basically, Hugh and I had done our reviews, done our own vote, and in the end, the flavor that won was wasabi ginger. And Rod and I were both pretty surprised by that. We were a little vexed by the decision, and when the decision came down, I actually didn't have much to say because I really hadn't processed it. And I had a small epiphany earlier this week that I quickly jotted down and wanted to share. And it just call it an epiphany is probably being generous because this is by no means, an ingenious thought. But what I realized was that Cappuccino, which was my vote for the flavor, didn't win. And it's not to say I was surprised that it didn't win, but I realized that a flavor like Cappuccino doesn't exist to win a contest like this. It exists to get publicity. Throughout the entire Lay's Do Us a Flavor contest, when you read about it or saw anything about it, what flavor was talked about most often?
Yeah, I think it's probably Cappuccino, and I think it was talked about in a negative light, which we kind of touched on. So it was probably thrown in there as the craziest flavor that... Not only the craziest, but a lot of people can relate to Cappuccino, whereas with wasabi ginger, it's a flavor that I don't really know about other than I don't think I like it. Whereas Cappuccino, I think everybody knows about it.
Cappuccino was never put forward as an actual flavor people would like or enjoy, as an actual contender for the next flavor. It was put forth as a headline grabber. And I think it served its purpose in that. So I found myself somewhat vindicated in my thinking because I have to think that Cappuccino, as they say, the only bad publicity is no publicity. So the fact that Lay's was in the headlines with their cappuccino flavor and people were able to talk about how gross it was or how interesting it was or whatever, that was the win for Lay's. I'm going to contend here and now. Cappuccino was the win for them. It was the purpose of the contest. It's what made the headlines. Look, these things create buzz. It makes our job enjoyable over here, but it really added some perspective to me on this vote. I knew, of course, logically, that the Lay's Do Us a Flavor was a marketing publicity stunt. I'm not stupid, but I had not come to grips yet as to why Cappuccino failed so miserably. And the answer is because it was never intended to succeed.
What it reminds me of, I don't want this to come off as sexist, because I think Miss America is an outdated phenomenon now in this day and age. It's a beauty contest. It's past its prime, but it reminds me of like my middle school, maybe high school days, watching the Miss America contest. It was a big thing back then. And the girls who made it into the final 10, there was always one where you were like, what? How did she make it in the final 10?
Yeah, you're right.
And yeah, I mean, back then, Miss America was a big deal, and this was probably more middle school. I remember discussing with my friends the next day at school, like the Miss America, and everybody would be talking about the one girl who was like, how'd she make it so far? She wasn't all that, So I think that is exactly what Cappuccino was in the Lay's Do Us a Flavor contest.
Hungry Dads!
Alright, so Hugh, I think you'll agree that Hungry Dads at its core is about our food indulgences as aging dads, and the links we'll go to in order to fulfill them. But then this week I realized that there's another end of the food spectrum that we haven't really addressed yet. It's all fun and games around here, but there are definitely times when food is a big letdown and even makes me quite angry. I know it's a difficult topic that many out there like to shy away from, but I think these things should be discussed in an open forum. So tonight I present to you not Hungry Dads, but
Angry Dads. You make Hulk angry! You not like Hulk angry!
This week I began making a list of all my pet peeves associated with food. Anything whatsoever within the world of food, which is obviously a broad spectrum. Anything that gets my blood pressure up. I came up with a list of about 20 things. And then in reviewing them, I found some to be a little obvious, like obviously nobody likes cold food or someone getting your order wrong at a restaurant. That's obviously a pet peeve for everyone. And some things really didn't get me that mad, so I narrowed the list of 20 down to about 5 things that are the absolute top Rod budget pet peeves when it comes to food. And then I tried to put them in order from 1 to 5, and honestly, I couldn't do it for a couple of reasons. One, they're fairly unique and disparate pain points, so it's hard to kind of compare apples to oranges here. Secondly, and I think more importantly, I just kept getting madder and madder thinking about these things, and I wasn't able to think clearly. I was throwing my notepad against the wall. It was a bad scene, so I just gave up and said I will present them in no particular order. Maybe our listeners, and maybe Hugh yourself, can give me feedback on these as I give them, or after I give all 5, and that'll allow us to rank them in a proper manner. So without further ado, I'm going to reveal my 5 food pet peeves. I'll briefly describe each peeve, why it peeves me so much, and then get some reaction and feedback from Hugh. You ready, Hugh?
Yeah, I actually just grabbed a pen. I want to write these down as they come. So just a quick production note for our listeners in case they're interested. Most weeks, Rod and I don't necessarily compare our notes. Sometimes we do a little bit, but we like to take each other's takes on things pretty fresh and spontaneously here. So, as I said, my pen is ready, and I can't wait to hear your peeves.
Thank you. Yeah, as you said, that's how we roll. We really don't share our segments each week, and we just like to get the honest feedback and reactions. So here we go with the top 5. Number 1 is too much ice in my soda at restaurants, especially fast food drive-thrus in a non-refill situation. I know we were bullish on McDonald's last week with their new marketing campaign, but they are the biggest culprit that I've noticed in over-icing sodas. It's happened to me at other places and other restaurants. Even if there are refills, if you're at a sit-down casual restaurant or even a nicer restaurant, it's even annoying then because you're running out of soda in like 2 seconds. But with McDonald's, every single time I go to their drive-thru, I get my soda and then I'm about 2 slurps into my 32-ounce large soda and it's gone. And I open the lid and it's full of ice to the very top. It's absurd how much ice is in there. And I am 99% sure that this is something that the employees are trained to do. So listen, McDonald's, or anyone else out there, I'm already paying a couple of bucks for a large soda that costs you about 8 cents to make. Your margins are huge on sodas. You don't need to further cheap out on me by giving me a $2 cup of ice with a drop of soda. It peeves me off. Hugh?
All right, this is where it's going to get interesting, Rod. And I will acknowledge you're likely in the majority
here. You like cold sodas, right?
I like my soda very cold. I tend to ask for, quote, lots of ice. And I offset my decision by always ordering the largest option. I say to myself, if I get the extra large, the double size, then I'll get the equivalent of a medium.
You're getting ripped off even more.
It's worth it to me. I like it cold. I like my ice. I can see you're getting upset. Another production note.
Part of the problem, not part of the solution.
I don't know if our listeners know that we're on Skype here, so I can see Rod. But I personally, I like it very cold.
No, I appreciate the honest feedback. You're part of the problem, not the solution. You don't think that a third of a cup of ice filled with soda would keep it sufficiently cold? And if you don't, that's fine.
I mean, sufficiently cold, perhaps, but not over a long haul. I like to enjoy my drink over time. And here's another weird thing that I'm not saying I'm in the majority. I don't mind when my soda's watered down a bit. It actually prolongs the experience. So I'll be sipping and then I'll actually let it sit for a while and let it get watered down. In my mind, I'm getting more free soda because it's refilling. And I don't mind the watered down texture.
And I don't like the watered down soda at all. So to each their own. This is obviously a hot button topic, so I think this is good fodder for those out there. If you have any thoughts of your own, shoot us a tweet, send us an email. This is really interesting. I'm interested now to see are they giving lots of ice because that's what people want. I live in a warm weather environment, so I've often thought maybe people like their cold drinks. Maybe I'm the one here that's just being overly sensitive, and I'm in the wrong. But I'd like to hear from other people.
Yeah, I might take a beating on this, but from the listeners, I don't know, but I do. I always say lots of ice, and I know that I'm ordering that large one. I know I'm paying for it because I want to pay for that cold.
So we'll agree to disagree on that, and I think that's good. I think, as I said, these are quirky, and some of them I think people will agree with, and some won't. So moving on to peeve number 2. This is trying to be healthy. This is usually with a side dish at a restaurant or a deli, and I get either A, subpar food with my healthy selection, or B, a non-healthy healthy food. And let me elaborate. Every once in a while, even Rod Budget will forgo the French fries or the giant sandwich at lunch in lieu of something a little healthier. It's rare, but when I make that decision, I don't want to be let down, and I often am. So as I mentioned, there are 2 potential letdowns at play in this scenario. I'll give a quick example of each. With getting subpar healthy food, this used to happen to me pretty frequently back when I lived and worked in New York City, where Hugh currently resides. He can probably relate, but I would often go to the corner deli on my lunch break and order one of the gigantic Pilot High sandwiches. Hugh alluded to these in episode 4 when we were discussing the amateurism of Arby's Meat Mountain sandwich, if you guys want to go back and check that out. But every now and again, I would forgo the giant sandwich in favor of a fruit salad, which are surprisingly filling and a decent lunch. They taste good, they've got some sugar, and they'll fill you up. And hey, I'm like, hey, I'll get a fruit salad today. I'm being a little healthier. So the people at the deli would pull together the fruit salad from the ice bucket fruit kind of behind the counter. I'd take it to my desk back at work, and the fruit would be kind of slimy and not fresh. It happened twice before I just gave up and went exclusively with giant sandwiches. It's a terrible feeling. You're trying to be healthy. You dig in, and it's just not of good quality. And the second scenario that I mentioned of getting unhealthy healthy food, this happens quite often at casual dining chain establishments. I think they're all guilty of this, so I won't single anyone out, and I can't remember where I've experienced this, but it's probably been at all of them. But every once in a while, I'll forego fries or mashed potatoes or another unhealthy side for green beans or asparagus in an attempt to be healthy. Then the vegetable of choice comes out, and it's just absolutely floating in a pond of butter. I mean, just slathered in butter. Don't they think that maybe the people who go for the vegetables are trying to be a little healthier when they order them? Of course, I eat the butter veggies, and they taste good, but I might as well have ordered the fries at that point and enjoyed them much more. It defeats the whole purpose of trying to order the healthy side. Hugh, any thoughts or experience with this?
First, on the fruit salad. I thought you were going to go a different way with that, and I thought you were going to key in on a peeve that I have on fruit salad in general, which is, in my experience, lay off the melon. It's all melon. If I want a fruit salad, I want different kinds of fruit. Bottom fill the melon at the bottom.
The honeydew and cantaloupe are filler melons. Classic filler.
And I agree. I like you, will have that occasion where I'll try to make the responsible choice. And then I end up regretting it. I don't know if I've had the unfresh fruit scenario, but I have then looked at this cup of melon and said to myself, ugh, why bother? I mean, I don't hate melon, but I didn't buy a cup of melon. I wanted a fruit salad. So I will share your opinion on that, but in my experience, the melon is the problem. Your second example, the casual dining, you got the vegetables swimming in butter. I'm going to go away from you once again a little bit here, and my calculation of that scenario is quite different. That calculation says to me, I tried to be healthy, but hey, this is going to be delicious. I think I secretly won here. I won on 2 levels. I got to show my desire to do the right thing, but yet I get to enjoy these vegetables. So my calculation is not disappointment, but secret pleasure.
I think that's a pretty astute observation. I think of all my peeves, this is probably the one that's the least peevish because, as you said, there's a slight part of me that's pretty happy that it's slathered in butter. But I think if I'm being completely honest to myself and our listeners, which I try to do, I'm a little more disappointed that I'm trying to be healthy and I'm not really being healthy. And as I said, I would rather have fries when it comes down to it if I'm going to be unhealthy. So there's that little disappointment in the back of my head as well. My third peeve is this generally happens with store-bought food. It's food that is difficult to open or the packaging is otherwise poorly designed. I'm not talking about pickle jars that are hard to twist off because I think there's a reason they need to be on there securely and everybody can relate to that. This is more along the lines of items that have, say, like the metal ring pull tabs. Think of shoestring potatoes, things you have to kind of lift up on and break the freshness seal and then peel off. And it's flat out dangerous. They're metal, sharp objects. I've cut myself before. Even tennis balls have moved past this model of the pull tab ring. I think tennis balls invented it. So why hasn't food gotten there? I know some of it has, but you'll still find the pull tab metal removal pretty commonly, and it's not just that. Lindsay olives, I love black olives, if I haven't mentioned that before. They have a new container that is seemingly great. Instead of a jar, it's a plastic tub that can be resealed with the plastic lid, kind of like margarine or anything else you would store in the fridge. So you can eat the olives as you please, you don't have to rush through them. Except it has the metal pull tab of death, and the olives are floating around in their own juices, so inevitably, when the pull tab comes off with some force, because you have to get some momentum going for it to come off, the olive juice goes flying everywhere. So I have to open them over the sink, and it still makes a mess. Or you have to be so careful with the pull tab that it kind of gets stuck halfway. Like I said, you have to have momentum to pull it all the way off, and then you're kind of trying to get it off, but it's sharp and it's just a disaster. I'm kind of picking on the olives, but there are other examples out there of things that are dangerous to open or difficult to open, or they spill when you open them. Even something as basic as cereal, I feel like it's difficult to open it properly without completely ripping the cereal inside bag open. Then you have to roll it down really tightly to preserve the freshness. And there are other examples out there. Hugh, what do you think? Are you frustrated by packaging?
Yeah, I think the cereal example is a good one. I think there's an inherent weakness on the vertical seal in those bags. You're opening the horizontal seal, and
Brilliant description.
You cannot, unless you're really paying attention, you can't avoid a rip along that vertical seal. And then
the vertical seal just rips down the middle, and then you have a mess.
And your cereal is on the counter or it's in the box, and once it's compromised, and even if you're careful, once it's compromised, that rip is just going to keep going down and down and down. So yeah, I think that's a solid example of a frustrating one that you shouldn't have to pay that much attention to.
The cereal that escapes the inner lining on the rip and then gets into the cardboard exterior of the box between the packaging and the box. I feel like there should be a name for that cereal, like those flakes that get out.
Yeah.
So if anybody has any ideas for naming those pieces of cereal, I feel like it's something people can relate to and it needs to have a name. My fourth pet peeve is sandwich bread that destroys my mouth. This happens mainly at restaurants or higher-end sandwich places. Panera comes to mind, and I'm generally a fan of Panera, but sometimes you order a sandwich and there's no indication that it comes on any specific sort of bread other than a generic thing that you'd expect. If it's going to come on a piece of bread with jagged edges on the outside, please let me know beforehand. And listen, I know some menus even indicate the type of bread, but if it's not called French, I'm probably not familiar with some sort of fancy name of a bread sourced from the Greek islands. I even tear my mouth up on bread that I might see beforehand, if I'm at a party or even at my house or a family gathering, where I see that, hey, this bread might hurt and I'm still going to hurt myself. So you need to help me out here because I'm not very good at this. I know there's a danger, but the bread still tastes good, so I'm going to eat it. And at a restaurant where you're not really describing it to me before I see it, I'm completely done for. Like I said, do I still eat it? Of course. Why? A, it tastes good. And B, I always think, hey, this is the time where it's not going to hurt. It's bread. It's not going to hurt me. It's just bread. And then it breaks through my skin. Hugh, what do you think?
You've keyed in on something very big here. And I am still having the debate in my head and in my life over these bread issues. I went through a period where I swore off crusty breads for exactly this reason. I just found it painful, inconvenient, and difficult. I thought I had made the right decision until I started finding that the soft breads have their downsides as well. And I actually don't want to go too much more because I have a page of notes where I'm...
Yeah, this sounds like it could be a bigger topic of breads in general.
Yeah. So let me just digress right now, and just say that there are real issues of the structural integrity of a sandwich and the ingredients that go into it, and bread is obviously a big piece of that, and the ups and downs and the crustiness of that bread brings its own joys and pain to be considered.
Interesting. I think we're going to need to expound on that, because all I can think of is I don't want to be bleeding from my mouth after I eat a sandwich. But we'll leave it at that, because it sounds like we might have more fodder to follow up on there. And my fifth, and maybe this might be my biggest pet peeve, I put it last, so maybe that's kind of a subliminal indication. This is poorly cut pizza pies. And there are 3 scenarios in the kind of world of poorly cut pizzas. Number 1, the pizza's not cut all the way through. You have to try to tear the piece of pizza the rest of the way. The cheese inevitably slides off. The toppings are going everywhere. Or you break the pizza slice at a bad angle. You're going to want to dig in right away. It's always piping hot, and I just want to grab a piece and be able to eat it. I hate it when it's not cut all the way through. How hard is it to apply ample pressure to cut through the pizza? There's even a special pizza cutting tool for this. Come on, people. Number 2, the second possibility is that the slices might be cut all the way through, but they are absurdly different in size. I don't need them to be perfect, but I'm usually sharing this pizza with someone else. Not always. If I'm home alone, I won't be, but I'm usually sharing. And I don't need to get into the politics of people sneaking the bigger slices versus the tiny, tiny slices that kind of get left to the end. This might seem like a kind of insider tip, but I think it's journal enough that everybody goes for the big slices. It's common sense. So everybody knows the trick. Everybody's going to go for 2 giant slices and say, oh, I only had 2 pieces. And third, and the worst of all, is a combination of the 2. If you ever run into this, you're in real trouble. The pizza's not cut all the way through, and the slices are all completely different sizes. This is the worst scenario. This usually happens with delivery, I found, from chain pizza places. It's an epidemic, I think. So pizza chefs of the world, I have a message for you. I know you're busy. I know there are a lot of pizza pies to be cut, but I beg you to make a proper aggressive cut that breaks through the entirety of the crust all the way from the center out to the edges of the pizza, and do your best to get those slices reasonably comparably sized. Is that too much to ask? Hugh, is it too much to ask?
It is not too much to ask, and at the risk of sounding, having some of that arrogance that comes from living in New York, I gotta say, this is not a problem I experience. Pizza is taken pretty seriously here. It is not generally served by pimply-faced teens. It is made by people whose family have been making pizza, and I'm not just talking about the fancy pizza places, but your run-of-the-mill corner shop is run by folks whose grandpa ran the pizza shop and his grandpa's grandpa ran the pizza shop. So they're running that place like a factory. They have the genetics and they have a muscle memory for the pizza making process. And that comes all the way from the creation of the dough and the ingredients to the slicing. So I'm not going to say it's impossible, but I can say I believe you when you say it's an epidemic. Here, not an epidemic. And I can tell you very quickly, if I ordered more than 1 pizza that had either of those problems, I would very quickly have 5 other phone numbers I could call to get a quality pie. So I feel for you. I see it's a problem, but I can't relate.
Hungry Dads.
So, Rod, when we did speak a little bit this week, and you let me know you were going to do food pet peeves, and you invited me to join you in these peeves. And I actually had a tough time coming up with peeves, to be perfectly honest. As I was thinking, I thought, I guess I'm just kind of a pretty food-tolerant person. I like most foods, and I don't really come across problems that frustrate me that much. But there was a food-related topic that actually, raised the hair on the back of my neck as I thought about it. And it's a little broader than what you talked about. And it's this. It's food snobbery. I want to talk a little bit about food snobbery. And it's interesting that I just got done talking about pizza here in New York and how I didn't experience the same problems as you, and that you, having Domino's where you are experiencing these problems. And I want to be clear right now. I live in New York where pizza is, considered to be very excellent, but that doesn't mean I won't eat a Domino's pizza and enjoy it. And in fact, a quick anecdote on that. I was in school. I was in a postgraduate level schooling situation, and there was part of the class portion, there was a case study or an issue where Domino's Pizza was being talked about, and the professor before the lecture very glibly said, and I'm in New York, by the way, very glibly says, Domino's Pizza. Does anyone here eat Domino's Pizza? And being very adverse to food snobbery, I saw this for what it was, and so I raised my hand. And I said, I do. I was the only person in the class of maybe 100 who raised his hand. And immediately the professor decided to make an example of me. And the whole class joined in letting me know what a neophyte, what a fool, what a sucker I was. Not even to be eating Domino's, but to admit to eating Domino's Pizza. Of course, you live in New York City. The pizza's the best here. Why would you ever order Domino's? And I wanted to just slink away. I wasn't interested in the confrontation, but I did have to say, well, number one, it can be cheaper. And number two, it's just different. I have a great appreciation for the pizza here in New York. It's delicious, and it is, on my opinion, the best pizza. But that doesn't mean sometimes, dollar for dollar, I'm not interested in something a little bit different, like a Domino's. And that type of elitism and food snobbery really makes me angry. It's my pet peeve. I'm not talking about brand loyalty. People like Coke more than Pepsi. That's great. It's kind of fun to have a Coke and Pepsi war or debate. I get it. I think you can say the same thing about deep dish versus New York style pizza. As long as it's friendly, I think that those kind of preferences are fun. You've got regional specialties and regional exceptionalism. New York has the best pizza. Texas has the best barbecue. Those are okay to say and to think as well. Although I do have many thoughts on that. Again, a note for a future episode, regional specialties. I think there's a lot to talk about there.
Yes.
I'm obviously not talking about personal preference. If you like something better than something else, that's perfectly okay. And the other thing that I'm not talking about is if someone has a loving concern for one's health. So that is to say that if my own wife tells me that she doesn't want me eating this, that, or the other, and she's very judgmental about it, that doesn't mean it's snobbery. It's actually out of her genuine concern for my health. So that's not what I'm talking about when I talk about someone who's passing judgment on when someone else is eating.
Food snobbery, I feel like, on many levels, has gotten completely out of control. I believe there are too many foodies out there these days. I think Yelp and the internet has kind of played into it where, you've got these people going to the nicest restaurants, or not even the nicest restaurants, but unique restaurants, and trying to pretend like they're better than everybody else because they ate some farm-raised thing with sage butter, and they're yelping about it while the sage butter is stuck in their beard and they don't realize it. Hungry Dads! Visit our website at hungrydads.com. Follow us on Twitter at hungry_dads. This has been a Hungry Dads production.
Wait, Rod.
Well,
break. Break. Take a look at your camera. when you went nuts.
I went nuts.
You knocked it over.
The camera has been... For those out there, my camera was knocked ajar when I slammed my fist on the desk.